here. Yeah, so Tracy Woodgrains, I hung out with you IRL just over 2 years ago now. It was, I believe, January 2020. We hung out in Oakland.
Yes.
Yeah, I pinged you on Reddit on the Mott, that subreddit, the Mott, and that's also why Yassine is here because you two are big participants over there. And I've become
Of
a little
where?
more
What is
aware
that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The subreddit?
Yeah, the Mott.
Yeah, I heard of it.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I wanted to bring both of you in here for two reasons. The Mott, we have that in common, and we and you two have being contributors to the Blocked and Reported podcast in common. That's the podcast of Katie Herzog and Jessie Singal. And yeah, so kind of wanted to just chat about. I guess we'll start with Blocked and Reported.
So you're recording this now already, right?
Yeah, it's not live or anything like that. I edit it like in the subsequent weeks, and then it goes up usually less than a month later.
Okay.
Yeah.
You should have just said you're Muppet Blast.
Oh right. Oh yeah, I'm also Muppet Blast.
I don't know if that's a big secret.
Yeah, now I ended up getting signed out of Reddit or something at some point about 5 or 6 months ago, and I tried to get back on, and I didn't have the login credentials or something for Muppet Blast, so I had to rename myself. Now it's Pongal H, which is shittier. Pongalh in one word.
Allow me to introduce you to password managers.
Yeah, I need something like that. Okay, so to backtrack just 1 second. Yeah, I Muppet Blast, my own contribution to Idea Space goes back, I don't know, to the mid 2000s. One of the earliest things I did was create MySpace pages for Boston anarchists, like Benjamin Tucker and people like that. I was also involved in antiwar.com way back then. And I went to these student seminars run by libertarian organizations, Mises Institute, with something Atlas Society. No, that's not it. Institute for Humane Studies. That's it. I went to those things.
That's George Mason.
Oh, it is IHS.
Yeah, Tyler Cowen, I think, was the chair. I went to George Mason.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. Yeah, that would explain why at one of the conferences I went to, there was some sort of meditation on the ideas of Brian Kaplan. maybe that explained it. But I'm let's see. I had a mentor at one point when I was considering grad school. His name was or is Jeffrey Friedman. He's the editor of a journal called Critical Review. It's very ivory tower. In the last 15 years or so, a lot of academics have felt a lot of pressure, I think, to move into I don't know, podcasting or social media of some kind, and or vlogging or something. He has stayed completely away from that. He's sort of terrified of the sort of populist turn, the cultural turn of a lot of politics lately. But I was involved in some of the stuff that he was doing as editor of Critical Review, sort of a libertarian gadfly journal, I would describe it as. And so anyway, yeah, in the last 15 years or so, I've gone down okay, so we've heard the libertarian to alt-right pipeline, right? So I did a kind of libertarian to some kind of vaguely post-liberal or even significantly influenced by the kind of anti-woke left path. That's a very long and clunky, blah, 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 blah pipeline to sort of detail. But yeah, that has been my path. So, okay, so a moment ago I was going to ask you to talk about Blocked and Reported, but since I gave a kind of a bio, are either of you interested in doing that? I would be sort of interested in Yassine off the top of my head, because I know I think you're a public defender or something, or you were involved in the John Brown Gun Club and whatnot.
Yes, storied history. So I got my economics degree at George Mason, so I have that affiliation.
Oh,
it's
okay.
probably around the time when I kind of began shifting it more towards libertarian politics and anarchist politics, especially with Brian Kaplan and Robin Hanson and that whole crew.
Yeah.
I did I've always been big on gun rights, so I did join the John Brown Gun Club because I wanted to advocate for that, proselytize for that, for a left-leaning audience. And the work that the ACLU on abortion rights and currently has been a public defender.
Okay, interesting. You work with the ACLU on abortion rights. Well, yeah, you are an interesting grab bag of stuff there, right? You have the gun stuff, which obviously like codes right, and maybe more than codes, and then the abortion rights. So that's that reminds me of what is that organization? Pink Pistols.
Yeah,
right.
I'm familiar with that organization. For those that don't know, it was like an explicitly pro-LGBT, however many acronyms there are now, gun rights organization. So it would list the instructors that were ostensibly favorable to that demographic because, most guns are culturally right. So it's hard to find kind of common political grounds. And I struggle with this, like when I try to find gun rights organizations that don't explicitly pander to the right.
Yeah.
The NRA is a big example of this. I just the turn they had like since 2016 has been to become essentially just like a Trump organization, where if you don't support Trump, then you don't support the NRA. But this infects other organizations.
Yeah, they're mired in some kind of corruption. What I'm hearing lately.
Oh yeah, they're dealing with a whole bunch of shit. But I used to be a member of their organization, and I would get letters. And the only reason I was a member was to join this gun range that required it as to join them. And I would get letters that would say like, help us defeat like the radical left, like re-elect Donald Trump for president. And it's just like, I don't care about this shit. And also, you guys suck as a gun rights organization.
Yeah. So they're the like premier gun rights organization. What is the second biggest? What's the other big one?
Probably Gun Owners of America, GOA.
Okay.
But they also have issues. So I don't know how much you want to talk about this. I have a lot to say about this area. Back when Trump like instituted like the Muslim travel ban, and it wormed its way to the Supreme Court, a lot of organizations have the right to file amicus briefs to say, we're not directly involved, but we support this. And Gun Owners of America filed an amicus brief in support of the Trump Muslim ban. And I read their amicus brief to try to figure out like, what the fuck does a gun rights organization have to do with immigration policy? And literally the only thing they say in their amicus brief is, we support the enforcement of laws, or something to that effect. Obviously, I think it's like a pretext, because the real answer is, well, our supporters love restricting immigration, so we're gonna do it too, which is, coincidentally, the exact same thing that's happening to the ACLU.
Right. I was going to say it mirrors people's complaints about the ACLU getting away from the sort of core mission and throwing this cultural stuff against the wall.
Yeah, that's happening. That's happening to every like nonprofit advocacy organization out there. Virtually every one of them. I recently spoke to someone that used to work at Greenpeace that quit from that organization, and it was largely because, like during the 2020 summer riots protest, Greenpeace was like really like jealous at how little attention their cause was getting, and so they tried to like reframe everything, like climate change is a racial justice issue,
right?
Nuclear energy is a racial justice issue. Whatever you wanted was always going to be a racial justice issue, because that's what had the attention of the public.
Yeah, it seems in the second half of the last decade, some the local animal rights organization, a feral cat rescue organization, in their sort of marketing collateral, a donation appeal collateral, has to somehow link it to George Floyd or the BLM cause, and if not that, then women's rights perhaps. It seems as if that's the junior partner in the kind of progressive pantheon of issues.
It's more going to be like trans rights. Yeah, but whatever the cause célèbre du jour is, you're going to have to find some way to attach your tendrils to it. Otherwise, you're going to sink.
Yeah. Tracing Woodgrains, do you have anything to add? You want to chime in with something like a bio, or maybe refer to anything that we're talking about?
Yeah, so my bio is not as illustrious as Yassine's, and mostly not as public. So the important parts of it I suppose, are that I am the editorial assistant for the Blockchain Reported podcast, and I have been for the past few months. Other than that, I am an online writer focused on education and cultural issues, and have been active for a few years in that domain, mostly taking, I'd describe it as a pessimistic centrist stance, looking at a world gone mad around me and trying to understand my place in it.
You're being humble, Trace.
A world gone mad. Yeah, so that the notion of clown world comes to mind. How much do you think that term somehow belongs to the right? And a related question is the right more cynically resigned than the left right now? What do you two think?
I mean, so that term, of course, originated in fairly far right-wing spaces, and so they managed to claim it pretty neatly, despite it being otherwise a very apt metaphor for a lot of things. I do think that them having coined it gives them the opportunity to hide away a bit from the role they play in the clownishness of much of it.
Right.
But yes, that's my thought on that term in
Very,
specific.
very superficially, I link it to the Joker movie, and at some point it becomes difficult to sort of disentangle what the right originated with, what is being ascribed to the right. So the movie The Joker was thought to be some sort of alt-right dog whistle, but the alt-right did not produce that movie, nor do they write for the magazines covering the movie and promoting it in some fashion.
I love the movie, by the way.
Yeah, it was good. So that's. Oh wait, no, yeah, Joker. That's DC, right? And then so it's in the whole Marvel versus DC thing. DC is a darker universe, from what I understand, and then that movie is, of course, quite dark. But that took the darkness of DC to another level, I'd say.
So I'm not too familiar with the term clown world. But what was your question about left versus right?
I was going to say, who is more cynically resigned, like to the point of kind of dismissing the current state of politics as, essentially clownish and coming at it with almost kind of nihilistically indifferent, let's just have fun approach. But
this gets into like a definitional issue, because if you asked me 20 years ago what is the right, I would have a ready answer for you, and I would be able to point to pylons like, I don't know, like the leader of the Republican Party to tell you what the party or the movement stands for. I don't know exactly what counts as right anymore, especially because so many of these proxy culture war battles occupy so much of people's attention.
Yeah, I feel like in the age of the, for these purposes, primarily Twitter panopticon, much of who we consider right, I can't trust anymore that those people would call themselves right. I know that other people are calling.
It's not just Twitter. It's not just Twitter, though.
No.
No, I mean, if we look at like vaccine acceptance, the COVID-19 vaccine was developed. You can credit it's the rapid development to a program that Donald Trump heavily encouraged. It was announced like while technically he was still in president, and at the time you had people as high profile as Kamala Harris saying, I don't trust the vaccine. I'm not going to take it because it's been like it was approved too quickly or whatever. But now, like, being anti-vaccine is coded as Republican or conservative, and it's not clear that there's like anything inherent within like the principles of the movement that would lead to that conclusion. Except this is just like what the tribal affiliation is.
Yeah, the COVID issue came so quickly and out of nowhere that it sort of confounds our understanding of what we think as a left or right issue. I feel strongly that historically something like that, the concern over biopolitical power and all of that the COVID regime kind of represents, would be more in the left's wheelhouse as something to be concerned about being somehow used egregiously in an authoritarian way. But it's the right that happens to have latched onto it, and it may have to do with those how the entire issue came up in the in early 2020 with Trump still in power. It's all path dependency from there on out, right? If it had been Biden, maybe it'd be flipped entirely.
Right, and there's a not insignificant portion of the right that blames Trump, quote unquote, losing, because that's, even saying that is controversial within some circles, losing the election because of COVID. And if you get deep into the fringes, the theory is that COVID was created and the mass hysteria followed was done in a calculated manner to deprive Trump of the presidency. So just based on like that happenstance, that accidental affiliation, you get these what appear to be earnest and strong position statements that don't really tie to like a philosophical principle.
So I agree with that in part, but I don't agree with it in full. I think that there are pretty clear justifications, at least heuristics, that you can use for the left and right that predict things like this pretty neatly. Specifically, that the right justifies its movements and its decisions very often through a freedom heuristic. That is, they say, oh yeah, we're anti-vaccine because we want freedom, whatever. We want to, don't tread on me, this whole concept. Even non-libertarians on the right gravitate towards this freedom explanation. So you look at the Republican Party platform, it's full of liberty, freedom, words like that, all over the place. Whereas the left justifies their decisions on many of the same domains through the lens of equality first. That is, are people being treated fairly? You see the words justice, equity, equality spread throughout their platform. Does this disproportionately affect minorities? Does this disproportionately affect the poor? So forth. And this isn't a perfect heuristic, but I do think in modern United States politics, it's a fairly consistent heuristic in terms of not necessarily always the specific positions people take. There will be surprises based on what's going on, but the justification they will give for them, they retrofit into that pattern.
Yeah. Now that, of course, exists alongside the with Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations, where he described conservatives being more germophobic, kind of a quick and dirty term there, just essentially more concerned about the spread of disease.
Which aged very poorly, I do have to say.
Yeah. That was the discussed hypothesis.
So it's like, so much for that. I mean, and yet in 2015 or so, before this happened, if you had said, the right operates on this freedom heuristic, that would have been correct as well. So between the two, something has to give, and
I don't believe that they operate on the freedom heuristic. I think it's shrouded in that manner, but specifically Trump has definitely changed my mind on that, especially with how the fallout from the 2020 election took place, where people literally sued Mike Pence to force him to overturn the election. And it's not clear to me like how that necessarily codes with freedom. It does seem a distinctly like more authoritarian flavor.
So I'm not claiming that they are staunch defenders of freedom as a principle, but that they justify their decisions through the lens of freedom as a principle. So in that case, they justify it through the lens of fighting back against this swamp machine that has consumed the whole government and is aggressively, through both soft cultural and hard governmental power, suppressing the will of the people, and that for the people to actually be free and the will of the people to actually be made manifest, an authoritarian coup would be justified. It's a bit of a stretch, I think, by the time they get to the end of those, but internally, and when you get into involved conversations with people who support these things, that is the route that they take to arrive at freedom justifies an authoritarian coup.
There's a materialist analysis here that would actually get you at the right being more upset about the COVID regime as well, and that I think is its impact on small business. Where Republicans are kind of like the small business party now. I mean, for the longest time, they were largely small business as well as big business, but it's seems like their core now is just the long tail of miscellaneous small business spread across the country, and they were pretty severely impacted by lockdowns, and to the degree that the government wasn't making them do it, and it really was just something popularly supported in the area by the elderly or those some more of an epidemiologically leaning concern, all put into place. This had an impact on small business in a way that it did not on Amazon Prime or in any purely online sort of business experience. So I think that would explain it as well.
I would dispute that the party is necessarily like the party of the small business. I think that's too disparate of a group to really group them and assign them to a specific political party.
Well, if you look at like most counties in the country, not population-wise, but most counties, I believe they lean red, and that's where you'll find the predominance of small business, not large. So I'm kind of going with that. I mean, obviously, you can be a small business owner in Alameda, California, or something, and it's not going to Republican leaning is not going to fit you, but
or New York City,
right?
Yeah.
But I do agree with Dane here. I think it's useful to have these sorts of heuristics for which groups, not which groups will 100% align with a political party or movement, but which groups will that political party or movement be speaking to when they speak. And I mean, an example of this on the left is very straightforwardly unions. I was intrigued going to an Andrew Yang meeting at one point, and I hadn't done all that much with real world politics growing up. I'm still fairly young, but when I went to an Andrew Yang meeting, what was striking to me is that even though his focus and his platform is not really something that I would say centers around unions, this specific meetup, unions came up again and again and again. And it was because he was a Democratic candidate in Iowa. And to be a Democratic candidate in Iowa, you are going to hit on unions, and you are going to hit on unions repeatedly. And I think it's that same sort of principle for small businesses for Republicans. They identify small businesses within the sphere of ours.
At one point, he was hanging out with truckers and kind of documenting that and like driving around with them, and that was kind of something he was doing. But it still is hard for me to think of Andrew Yang as kind of like this heartland candidate or aligned with unions or anything like that. Part of it, I admit, is sort of racial. I just, I see a successful Asian entrepreneur type, and I just think, West Coast or New York or something. Yeah, with his plan for UBI, that seems to me like something that would kind of get around the need for a union.
Right. I don't think of him as a union guy in any sense, which is why it was so striking to me when he presented himself and the people speaking for him presented him as so much this champion of unions there. My thought was, hold on, this has nothing to do with his specific platform. It feels like raw recognition that this is the demographic I need to be seen to support.
Yeah, I just think of him of the Reddit candidate.
Yeah, I don't think of Reddit readers as big union people, although they might posture as being pro Starbucks union efforts wherever they hear about it.
Yeah. You make a post that has the word union in it and nothing else, you'll get upvotes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean his I almost said shtick. That's not a very nice word to use. It undersells it, but his argument about robots are coming for your jobs. I mean, those sound like fighting words to a union. Like, well, over our dead bodies. I mean, why do you act as if that's somehow a given? And I believe that he does kind of act as if that's a given. It's sort of like this capitalist teleology he relies on that is eventually going to roboticize everything.
Yeah. So you asked us originally about like our association with Blocked and Reported.
Right. Yeah. Back to that.
Yeah. I'm friends with Katie Herzog in real life. We've
you're
hung out
both
a few times.
in the Northwest area, right? She's.
I'm in the Northwest, sure, but not tracing, or tracing has not specified.
Oh no, I meant Katie is up there originally. I think she's like on the East Coast now or something, but she is from Vancouver or Seattle area. No, yeah, Seattle, because it was The Stranger, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. She used to work at The Stranger, and I got introduced to her by actually Andy No of all people. He's the one that said, "Hey, like I have a Seattle journalist that wants to talk to you," and that's how her and I got introduced to each other. And when Andy No released his book Unmasked, which is about Antifa,
yeah,
that
and
was
he's
like in
with that
y-
in some ways. Like
yeah.
ever being in the good graces of the left. I think that finished it. Anyway.
I don't think he ever had a chance. You're talking about
Yeah,
No?
arguably yes.
Yeah, I don't think he ever had a chance, given his focus. But his book came out, and I read it, and because I'm quoted in the book. I had some peculiar perspective to offer, so I did a book review, and I was interviewed by Herzog on the Blackton Reported podcast. That was like in June 2021, where I talked about Andy No's book. And since then, now I'm a contributing writer with Jessie Singal